This episode of Sleepy is proudly sponsored by Shopify. When I first started this show and started podcasting in general, I learned a lot of stuff the hard way. Writing, editing, recording, producing, marketing, social media. It was a lot to start doing this, and while I love knowing how to do all those things now, I definitely would have loved to know about tools that would have made my life simpler, like I do today. Tools that make my business and my life just run smoother. Well, Shopify is definitely one of those tools. It is the business behind the business. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel to businesses just getting started. There's hundreds of ready-to-use templates to build a beautiful online store that matches your brand. Shopify has tons of helpful AI tools to help you build out and fill your site in no time. It's also really easy to get the word out with easily made email and social media campaigns. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. So if you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into reality with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Otis. Go to shopify.com/OTIS. Shopify.com/Otis. I'll put a link for this in the show notes. Thanks.
At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Hey, my name's Otis Gray, and you're listening to Sleepy. A podcast where I read old books to help you get to sleep. And this is a spooky October bedtime story for you. And before we get to the bedtime story, I just want to profoundly thank all of our brand new patrons on patreon.com, which is where you can go to get an ad-free version of the show. So, this week's amazing new patrons: A.W. Awesome, Pamela Mullis, Katrina Gragan, Claire, Nicole Blake, Amanda Harvey, Ash Gagnon, Valeda Scribner, and a really big shout out to Frost Signal. Thank you all so much for being a part of making this show. It really, really means a lot. Thank you. And if you don't know, all these wonderful people that I just listed off, they are brand new direct supporters of this show on patreon.com, which is just a place that allows you to directly support creators who make the stuff that you like. So if you want to be a part of making this show and have your name read on the show for any amount, even $1, which is what most people give and goes such a long way for me, then you can go to patreon.com/sleepyradio. $2 gets you an ad-free version of Sleepy. At $5, you get access to the Sleepy Poetry Feed. But no matter how much you donate, it is so appreciated. So if you'd like to, I would appreciate it. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/sleepyradio. Thank you. And as always, the music you're hearing is by my good friend James Lepkowski, and the cover art for Sleepy is by Gracie Kanan. Well, it is officially spooky October. You know that means that this entire month will be dedicated to some more mysterious, suspenseful, spooky stories. I know a lot of listeners look forward to this month, and I hope you do too. Tonight's story is a really, really great story by Richard Marsh, who I'd never read on the show before. And it's definitely got a slow start. And in the end of this little the first couple chapters of this book, which I'm about to read you, there is definitely, it's a little bit spooky. So, yeah, just letting you know that this Spooky October reading very much lives up to its title. And if you'd like something a little bit more calm and spacey and less spooky, then you can go find one of the other 450 plus episodes of the show, and maybe skip this one. That said, I really like this story. It's definitely one of those books I want to read the rest of. So, that's enough of me yapping. Without further ado, this is The Beetle by Richard Marsh. And now is the time for you to fluff up your pillow just how you like it. Feel yourself melt into your bed. Get real comfortable. Close your eyes. And let me read to you. Book 1. The House with the Open Window. The surprising narration of Robert Holt. Chapter 1. Outside. No room, full up. He banged the door in my face. That was the final blow. To have tramped about all day, looking for work, to have begged even for a job which would give me money enough to buy a little food, and to have tramped and to have begged in vain, that was bad. But sick at heart, depressed in mind and body, exhausted by hunger and fatigue, to have been compelled to pocket any little pride I have left, and solicit, as the penniless, homeless tramp which I indeed was, a night's lodging in the casual ward, and solicit it in vain. That was worse, much worse, about as bad can be. I stared, stupidly, at the door, which had just been banged in my face. I could scarcely believe that the thing was possible. I had hardly expected to figure as a tramp, but supposing it conceivable that I could become a tramp, that I should be refused admission to that abode of all ignominy, the tramp's ward, was to have attained a depth of misery of which never even nightmares I had dreamed. As I stood wondering what I should do, a man slouched towards me, out of the shadow of the wall. "Won't you let her in?" "He says it's full." "Says it's full, does he? That's the lay at Fulham. They always say it's full. They wants to keep the number down." I looked at the man askance. His head hung forward. His hands were in his trouser pockets. His clothes were rags. His tone was husky. "Do you mean that they say it's full when it isn't? That they won't let me in, although there's room?" "That's it. Blokes are kidding you." "But if there's room, aren't they bound to let me in?" "Course they are. And blimey, if I was you, I'd make 'em. Blimey, I would." He broke into a volley of execrations. "But what am I to do?" "Why, give him another rouser. Let him know as he won't be kidded." I hesitated. Then, acting on his suggestion, for the second time, I rang the bell. The door was flung wide open, and the grizzled pauper, who had previously responded to my summons, stood in the open doorway. Had he been the chairman of the Board of Guardians himself, he could not have addressed me with greater scorn. "What, here again? What's your little game? Think I've nothing better to do than to wait upon the likes of you?" "I want to be admitted." Then you won't be admitted. I want to see someone in authority. Ain't you seeing someone in authority? I want to see someone besides you. I want to see the master. Then you won't see the master. He moved the door swiftly too, but prepared for such a maneuver, I thrust my foot sufficiently inside to prevent his shutting it. I continued to address him. Are you sure that the ward is full? Full 2 hours ago. But what am I to do? I don't know what you're to do. Which is the next nearest workhouse? Kensington. Suddenly opening the door as he answered me, putting out his arm, he thrust me backwards. Before I could recover, the door was closed. The man in rags had continued a grim spectator of the scene. Now he spoke. Nice bloke, ain't he? He's only one of the paupers. Has he any right to act as one of the officials? I told you some of them paupers is wuss than the officers. A long sight wuss. They thinks they own the houses. Blimey, they do. Oh, it's a fine world, this is. He paused. I hesitated. For some time there had been a suspicion of rain in the air. Now it was commencing to fall in a fine but soaking drizzle. It only needed that to fill my cup to overflowing. My companion was regarding me with a sort of sullen curiosity. Ain't you got no money? Not a farthing. Done much of this sort of thing? It's the first time I've been to a casual ward, and it doesn't seem as if I'm going to get in now. I thought you looked as if you was a bit fresh. What are you going to do? How far is it to Kensington? Workus? About 3 miles. But if I was you, I'd try St. George's. Where's that? In the Fulham Road. Kensington's only a small place. They do you well there. And it's always full as soon as the doors open. So you'd have more chance at St. George. He was silent. I turned his words over in my mind, feeling as little disposed to try one place as the other. Presently he began again. I've traveled from reading this day. I've tramped every foot, and all the way as I come along, I'll have a shakedown at Hammersmith, I says, and now I'm as far off from it as ever. This is a darn fine country. This is. I wish every darn soul it was swept into the darn sea. Blimey, I do. But I ain't going to go no further. I'll have a bed in Hammersmith, or I'll know the reason why. How are you going to manage it? Have you got any money? Got any money? My crikey. I look as though I had. I sound as though I had too. I ain't had no brads, except now and then a brown, this last 6 months. How are you going to get a bed then? How am I going to? Well, like this way. He picked up 2 stones, one in either hand. The one in his left, he flung at the glass which was over the door of the casual ward. It crashed through it, and through the lamp beyond. That's how I'm going to get a bed. The door was hastily opened. The grizzled pauper reappeared. He shouted as he peered at us in the darkness. Who done that? I done that, Governor. And if you like, you can see me do the other. It might do your eyesight good. Before the grizzled pauper could interfere, he had hurled the stone in his right hand through another pane. I felt that it was time for me to go. He was earning a night's rest at a price which, even in my extremity, I was not disposed to pay. When I left, 2 or 3 other persons had appeared upon the scene. and the man in rags was addressing them with a degree of frankness, which, in that direction, left little to be desired. I slunk away unnoticed, but had not gone far before I had almost decided that I might as well have thrown in my fortune with the bolder wretch, and smashed a window too. Indeed, more than once my feet faltered, as I all but returned to do the feat which I had left undone. A more miserable night for an out-of-door excursion I could hardly have chosen. The rain was like a mist, and was not only drenching me to the skin, but it was rendering it difficult to see more than a little distance in any direction. The neighborhood was badly lighted. It was one in which I was a stranger. I'd come to Hammersmith as a last resource. It had seemed to me that I had tried to find some occupation which would enable me to keep body and soul together in every other part of London, and that now only Hammersmith was left. And at Hammersmith, even the workhouse would have none of me. Retreating from the inhospitable portal of the casual ward, I had taken the first turning to the left, and at that moment had been glad to take it. In the darkness and the rain, the locality which I was entering appeared unfinished. I seemed to be leaving civilization behind me. The path was unpaved, the road rough and uneven, as if it had never been properly made. Houses were few and far between. Those which I did encounter seemed, in the imperfect light, amid the general desolation, to be cottages which were crumbling to decay. Exactly where I was, I could not tell. I had a faint notion that, if I only kept on long enough, I should strike some part of Walham Green. How long I should have to keep on, I could only guess. Not a creature seemed to be about of whom I could make inquiries. It was as if I were in a land of desolation. I suppose it was between 11 o'clock and midnight. I had not given up my quest for work till all the shops were closed. And in Hammersmith, that night, at any rate, there were not early closers. Then I had lounged about dispiritedly, wondering what was the next thing I could do. It was only because I feared that if I attempted to spend the night in the open air, without food, when the morning came I should be broken up and fit for nothing, that I sought a night's free board and lodging. It was really hunger which drove me to the workhouse door. That was Wednesday. Since the Sunday night preceding, nothing had passed my lips save water from the public fountains, with the exception of a crust of bread, which a man had given me, whom I had found crouching at the root of a tree in Holland Park. For 3 days, I had been fasting, practically all the time upon my feet. It seemed to me that if I had to go hungry till the morning, I should collapse. There would be an end. Yet in that strange and inhospitable place, where was I to get food at that time of night, and how? I do not know how far I went. Every yard I covered, my feet dragged more. I was dead beat, inside and out. I had neither strength nor courage left, and within there was that frightful craving, which was as though it shrieked aloud. I leant against some palings, dazed and giddy. If only death had come upon me quickly, painlessly, how true a friend I should have thought it. It was the agony of dying inch by inch which was so hard to bear. It was some minutes before I could collect myself sufficiently to withdraw from the support of the railings and to start afresh. I stumbled blindly over the uneven road. Once, like a drunken man, I lurched forward and fell upon my knees. Such was my backboneless state that I for some seconds remained where I was, half disposed to let things slide, except the good of the gods had sent me, and make a night of it just there. A long night, I fancy, it would have been, stretching from time into eternity. Having regained my feet, I had gone perhaps another couple of 100 yards along the road. Heaven knows that it seemed to me just then a couple of miles, when there came over me again that overpowering giddiness, which, I take it, was born of my agony of hunger. I staggered helplessly against a low wall, which, just there, was at the side of the path. Without it, I should have fallen in a heap. The attack appeared to last for hours. I suppose it was only seconds. And when I came to myself, it was as though I had been aroused from a swoon of sleep, aroused to an extremity of pain. I exclaimed aloud, "For a loaf of bread, what wouldn't I do?" I looked about me in a kind of frenzy. As I did so, I for the first time became conscious that behind me was a house. It was not a large one. It was one of those so-called villas, which are springing up in multitudes all around London, and which are let at rentals of some 25 to 40 pounds a year. It was detached. So far as I could see, in the imperfect light, there was not another building within 20 or 30 yards of either side of it. It was in 2 stories. There were 3 windows in the upper story. Behind each, the blinds were closely drawn. The hall door was on my right. It was approached by a little wooden gate. The house itself was so close to the public road that by leaning over the wall, I could have touched either of the windows on the lower floor. There were 2 of them. One of them was a bow window. The bow window was open. The bottom center sash was raised about 6 inches. Chapter 2. Inside. I realized, and so to speak, mentally photographed all the little details of the house in front of which I was standing with what almost amounted to a gleam of preternatural perception. An instant before, the world swam before my eyes. I saw nothing. Now I saw everything, with a clearness which, as it were, was shocking. Above all, I saw the open window. I stared at it, conscious, as I do, of a curious catching of the breath. It was so near to me, so very near. I had but to stretch out my hand to thrust it through the aperture. Once inside, my hand would at least be dry. How it rained out there. My scanty clothing was soaked. I was wet to the skin. I was shivering. And each second, it seemed to rain still faster. My teeth were chattering. The damp was liquefying the very marrow in my bones. And inside that open window, it must be, so warm, so dry. There was not a soul in sight, not a human being anywhere near. I listened. There was not a sound. I alone was at the mercy of the sodden night. Of all God's creatures, the only one unsheltered from the fountains of heaven which he had opened. There was not one to see what I might do, not one to care. I need fear no spy. Perhaps the house was empty. Nay, probably. It was my plain duty to knock at the door, rouse the inmates, and call attention to their oversight, the open window. The least they could do would be to reward me for my pains. But suppose the place was empty, what would be the use of knocking? It would be to make a useless clatter, possibly to disturb the neighborhood for nothing. And even if the people were at home, I might go unrewarded. I had learned, in a hard school, the world's ingratitude. To have caused the window to be closed, the inviting window, the tempting window, the convenient window. And then to be no better for it after all, but still be penniless, hopeless, hungry, out in the cold and in the rain. Better anything than that. In such a situation, too late, I should say to myself that mine had been the conduct of a fool, and I should say it justly too, to be sure. Leaning over the low wall, I found that I could very easily put my hand inside the room. How warm it was in there. I could feel the difference of temperature in my fingertips. Very quietly, I stepped right over the wall. There was just room to stand in comfort between the window and the wall. The ground felt to the foot as if it were cemented. Stooping down, I peered through the opening. I could see nothing. It was black as pitch inside. The blind was drawn right up. It seemed incredible that anyone could be at home. I've gone to bed, leaving the blind up and the window open. I placed my ear to the crevice. How still it was. Beyond doubt, the place was empty. I decided to push the window up another inch or two, so as to enable me to reconnoiter. If anyone caught me in the act, then there would be an opportunity to describe the circumstances and to explain how I was just on the point of giving the alarm. Only I must go carefully. In such damp weather, it was probable that the sash would creak. Not a bit of it. It moved as readily and as noiselessly as if it had been oiled. This silence of the sash so emboldened me that I raised it more than I intended. In fact, as far as it would go. Not by a sound did it betray me. Bending over the sill, I put my head and half my body into the room. But I was no forwarder. I could see nothing, not a thing. For all I could tell, the room might be unfurnished. Indeed, the likelihood of such an explanation began to occur to me. I might have chanced upon an empty house. In the darkness, there was nothing to suggest the contrary. What was I to do? Well, if the house was empty, in such a plight as mine, I might be said to have a moral, if not a legal, right to its bare shelter. Who, with a heart in his bosom, would deny it to me? Hardly the most punctilious landlord. Raising myself by means of the sill, I slipped my legs into the room. The moment I did so, I became conscious that, at any rate, the room was not entirely unfurnished. The floor was carpeted. I've had my feet on some good carpets in my time. I know what carpets are, but never did I stand upon a softer one than that. It reminded me, somehow, even then, of the turf in Richmond Park. It caressed my instep and sprang beneath my tread. To my poor, travel-worn feet, it was luxury after the puddly, uneven road. Should I, now that I had ascertained that the room was, at least, partially furnished, beat a retreat? Or should I push my researches further? It would have been rapture to have thrown off my clothes and to have sunk down on the carpet then and there to sleep. But I was so hungry, so famine-goaded. What would I not have given to have lighted on something good to eat? I moved a step or two forward, gingerly, reaching out with my hands, lest I struck, unawares, against some unseen thing. When I had taken 3 or 4 such steps, without encountering an obstacle, or indeed anything at all, I began all at once to wish I had not seen the house, that I had passed it by, that I had not come through the window, that I were safely out of it again. I became, on a sudden, aware that something was with me in the room. There was nothing ostensible to lead me to such a conviction. It may be that my faculties were unnaturally keen, but all at once I knew that there was something there. What was more, I had a horrible persuasion that, though unseeing, I was seen, that my every movement was being watched. What it was that was with me I could not tell. I could not even guess. It was as though something in my mental organization had been stricken by sudden paralysis. It may seem childish to use such language, but I was overwrought, played out, physically speaking, at my last encounter. And in an instant, without the slightest warning, I was conscious of a very curious sensation, the like of which I never felt before, and the like of which I pray that I never may feel again. A sensation of panic fear. I remained rooted to the spot on which I stood, not daring to move, fearing to draw my breath. I felt that there was a presence with me in the room, something strange, something evil. I do not know how long I stood there, spellbound, but certainly for some considerable space of time. By degrees, as nothing moved, nothing was seen, nothing was heard, and nothing happened, I made an effort to better play the man. I knew that at the moment I played the cur, and endeavored to ask myself of what it was I was afraid. I was shivering at my own imaginings. What could be in the room to have suffered me to open the window and to enter unopposed? Whatever it was surely to the full as great a coward as I was, or why permit unchecked my burglarious entry? Since I had been allowed to enter, the probability was that I should be at liberty to retreat, and I was sensible of a much keener desire to retreat than I'd ever had to enter. I had to put the greatest amount of pressure upon myself before I could summon up sufficient courage to enable me to even turn my head upon my shoulders. And the moment I did so, I turned it back again. What constrained me to save my soul, I could not have said, but I was constrained. My heart was palpitating in my bosom. I could hear it beat. I was trembling so that I could scarcely stand. I was overwhelmed by a fresh flood of terror. I stared in front of me with eyes in which, had it been light, would have been seen the frenzy of unreasoning fear. My ears were strained so that I listened with an acuteness of tension which was painful. Something moved, slightly, with so slight a sound that would have scarcely been audible to other ears save mine. But I heard. I was looking in the direction from which the movement came, and as I looked, I saw in front of me 2 specks of light. They had not been there moments before. That I could swear. They were there now. They were eyes. I told myself they were eyes. I had heard how cats' eyes gleam in the dark, though I had never seen them. And I said to myself that these were cat's eyes, that the thing in front of me was nothing but a cat. But I knew I lied. I knew that these were eyes, and I knew they were not cat's eyes, but what eyes they were, I did not know, nor dared to think. They moved towards me. The creature to which the eyes belonged was coming closer. So intense was my desire to fly that I would much rather have died than stood there still. Yet I could not control a limb. My limbs were as if they were not mine. The eyes came on, noiselessly. At first they were between 2 and 3 feet from the ground. But on a sudden, there was a squelching sound, as if some yielding body had been squashed upon the floor. The eyes vanished, to reappear a moment afterwards, at which I judged to be a distance of some 6 inches from the floor, and they again came on. So it seemed that the creature, whatever it was to which the eyes belonged, was, after all, but small. Why I did not obey the frantic longing which I had to flee from it, I cannot tell. I only know I could not. I take it that the stress and privations which I had lately undergone, and which I was, even then, still undergoing, had much to do with my conduct at the moment, and with the part I played in all that followed. Ordinarily, I believe that I have as high a spirit as the average man, and as solid a resolution. But when one has been dragged through the valley of humiliation and plunged again and again into the waters of bitterness and privation, a man can be constrained to a course of action which, in his happier moments, he would have deemed himself incapable. I know this of my own knowledge. Slowly, the eyes came on, with a strange slowness, and as they came, they moved from side to side as if their owner walked unevenly. Nothing could have exceeded the horror with which I awaited their approach, except my incapacity to escape them. Not for an instant did my glance pass from them. I could not have shut my eyes for all the gold the world contains. So that as they came closer, I had to look right down to what seemed to be almost the level of my feet. And at last, they reached my feet. They never paused. On a sudden, I felt something on my Booo, and with a sense of shrinking, horror, nausea, rendering me momentarily more helpless, I realized that the creature was beginning to ascend my legs, to climb my body. Even then, what it was I could not tell. It mounted me, apparently, with as much ease as if I had been horizontal instead of perpendicular. It was as though it were some gigantic spider, a spider of nightmares, a monstrous conception of some dreadful vision. It pressed lightly against my clothing with what might, for all the world, have been spider's legs. There was an amazing host of them. I felt the pressure of each separate one. They embraced me softly, stickily, as if the creature glued and unglued them each time it moved. Higher and higher, it gained my loins. It was moving towards the pit of my stomach. The helplessness with which I suffered its invasion was not the least part of my agony. It was that helplessness which we know in dreadful dreams. I understood quite well that if I did but give myself a hearty shake, the creature would fall off, but I had not a muscle in my command. As the creature mounted, its eyes began to play the part of two small lamps. They positively emitted rays of light. By their rays, I began to perceive faint outlines of its body. It seemed larger than I supposed. Either the body itself was slightly phosphorescent, or it was of a peculiar yellow hue. It gleamed in the darkness. What it was, there was still nothing to positively show, but the impression grew upon me that it was some member of the spider family, some monstrous member, of the like of which I had never heard or read. It was heavy, so heavy indeed that I wondered how, with so slight a pressure, it managed to retain its hold. That it did so by the aid of some adhesive substance at the end of its legs, I was sure. I could feel it stick. Its weight increased as it ascended, and its smell. I had been for some time aware that it emitted an unpleasant, fetid odor. As it neared my face, it became so intense as to be unbearable. It was at my chest. I became more and more conscious of an uncomfortable wobbling motion, as if each time it breathed, its body heaved. Its forelegs touched the bare skin about the base of my neck. They stuck to it. Shall I ever forget the feeling? I have it often in my dreams. While it hung on, with those in front, it seemed to draw its other legs up after it. It crawled up my neck with hideous slowness, a quarter of an inch at a time, its weight compelling me to brace the muscles of my back. It reached my chin. It touched my lips, and I stood still and bore it all, while it enveloped my face with its huge, slimy, evil-smelling body, and embraced me with its myriad legs. The horror of it made me mad. I shook myself like one stricken by a shaking ague. I shook the creature off. It squashed upon the floor, shrieking like some lost spirit. Turning, I dashed towards the window. As I went, my foot catching in some obstacle, I fell headlong on the floor. Picking myself up as quickly as I could, I resumed my flight. Rain or no rain, oh, to get out of that room. I already had my hand upon the sill. In another instant, I should have been over it. Then, despite my hunger, my fatigues, let anyone have stopped me if they could, when someone behind me struck a light. Thank you for listening to Sleepy. Good night.